Welcome to the Awaken Heart Podcast. I'm your host, Nancy Walters. Get ready to create magic and miracles as you lean into your heart's desires. I believe not only does the heart want what it wants, but it knows. This show is a weekly deep dive into what it means to live from an awakened heart. I'll be sharing inspiring stories and real conversations with people just like you, who have turned the ordinary into the extraordinary. My mission is to show you how you too can be connected and heart-centered in every area of your life. Your journey to aligning with more love, more joy, and your wildest dreams come true starts now. Welcome back to the Awaken Heart Podcast. I'm your host, Nancy Walters, and as I am recording this, I am still feeling the powerful energy of that new moon that was just here, March 21st. And it just literally, I really felt it. It's a really powerful new moon, and I always feel a little change just before anything goes full, or if it's new, I can't sleep and whatnot, but I've been sleeping like a baby. It's been pretty amazing. And we also had the spring equinox, and it's a pretty powerful time this year as we go into the spring and the energies around it. And this new moon is a huge shift in the collective frequency, with Pluto moving into Aquarius and start of the astrological new year. No one can hide in this energy. The masks are coming off. The shadow is being called into the light. No more masks. And I really don't know that much about astrology, but I know that we're going through a real big change as it goes into this new sign. And change is one of the only constants that we have. Nothing ever stays the same, and change is the only true constant we have. But how you show up in the face of change is the real challenge, because to step into the unknown, our mind always tries to control, to protect ourselves, to see what is ahead. But all the gifts lie in the present and in the not knowing, and allowing yourself to trust and take those first steps forwards onto the path and letting it unfold as you go. Today's guest, Suzanne Anderson, knows about making her path by walking. When Susan's beloved husband took his life, and with it, her life as she knew it, Suzanne faced a choice. Would she be broken down and defeated, or broken open and transformed? Suzanne's new book, You Make Your Path by Walking, a transformational field guide through trauma and loss, will be out this June. And I had the fortitude to get an advanced copy, and I really dived into this beautifully written book that has so many beautiful stories and offers so many tools for transformation. And this book accompanies readers on their own journeys through the barren landscape of trauma and grief, offering comfort, guidance, and inspiration to make the meaning out of loss. This is great for you, whether you are going through a personal dark night or struggling with these uncertain and disruptive global times. This book offers a proven pathway to allow the breaking down to the breaking open into a whole new way of living, loving, and leading. Suzanne drew from her years of exploration into the development of human potential and the personal shattering journey of loss. Suzanne guides you to make your own path through the darkest of times and to become a light in the world that others can look to in their own times of need. Suzanne Anderson is the founder of the Mysterial Woman, a psychologist, author, coach, leadership consultant, and transformational teacher. Her pioneering work in guiding women to awaken their full feminine and masculine strengths combines insights and practices from ancient wisdom, depth psychology, and modern neuroscience. She has dedicated the past 30 years to decoding an embodied, integral, and accelerated archetypal pathway to unlock the next level of our innate potential. Hi, Suzanne. Welcome to the Awaken Heart Podcast.
Hi, Nancy. Thank you for having me.
I know that we're both on the same part of the world right now. We're both in the Pacific Northwest. And I don't know if you got doused as much as we did in the last week. Like, couldn't go anywhere. And the snow in the Pacific Northwest, Portland's famous for when it snows, you stay home because you cannot navigate these roads at all. Was it like that for you up there?
You know what? I did hear that you had it really badly down there, but we didn't get the snow this round. And that stayed,
Oh, good.
it's just like a little sprinkling, but a lot of rain. Yep, that's
Okay.
but I must say I'm Canadian and from the East
Mm,
Coast, and I actually like where there was a lot of snow. I like
hmm
this weather and the seasons, and
mm,
I think we live out here. Some people say, "How could you live in all the rain?" But I love watching nature in
hmm
its various phases, and I don't mind it.
hmm Yeah, I see that a lot of like winter, it's turning inwards. It's integrating, it's slowing down. And I do like the seasons. That's why I moved from California up here and I'm a Michigan native. So I shouldn't be too surprised about the snow, but I just couldn't go anywhere and I was fine for 4 days. And then when I went out on the fourth day and my street was still ice, I was like, okay, I need to drive. I'm terrified of driving. Michigan, it's flat. So anyway,
Yeah.
yes. So, Suzanne, I'm so excited to have you on our show. You have a book coming out in June, and I started reading it. I got through the whole first section of it, and it's pretty incredible the way that you write. It just literally, I've been drawn in, and I didn't want to stop reading, but I had to go to bed. I had to go to sleep, so I had to turn off the lights. So, I plan on continuing tonight. That's going to be my night pleasure today to really delve more into your book. And you had really a devastating loss that I'll let you go into more, but you turned it instead of it defeating you, you really took it, you really used it to really transform and really rise above it all. And you transformed your life instead of it letting it, like a lot of people would just let it take you down and beat you down. And you really used it to really, there's something from your book that I loved when you were going into your depths of despair, that one of your friends had come over and he said it's the biggest Hades grab and that you know how to navigate in the dark. So he advised you to surrender now and let the descent take you where it must, and that others will hold space for you in the upper world. And something cleared in your mind and it really resonated with you. And then you said, okay, one day you'll emerge from this. So you surrendered and you surrendered to the dark and then you went down. And that really resonates with me because so many of us try to avoid grief. We try to avoid pain or spiritually bypassing, but the only way through to the other side is really going straight forward, straight through it, straight through the fire and straight down into the depths of despair, which you did. You helped so many other women through what you went through. Can you give a background about you had a life in the corporate world and then it led to you're doing a lot of with the feminine energies and then what led you into writing this book?
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Okay. This touched on a lot of
It's a lot.
things there, which is great. Um, Tapestry. I think it might be worth going. I sometimes think of these two moments. One is sort of the bliss wake up call, and then one was this Hades or the darker wake up call, which was you were just referencing. But I think it's worth maybe just hooking them up, if I may. So I was a management consultant and leadership consultant working with the Fortune 100 companies and doing that world in that time in the 90s, which was a very heady time. Companies were in the middle of change. I was there weren't that many women management consultants and traveling all over. It was a very exciting time. Um, but I also was seeing the few women that were at the leadership levels I was working at were suffering enormously. And yet we're having a really hard time opening up to the ideas that I was there to bring as a consultant, trying to shift from a very, heavy, sort of more masculine model of leadership. A lot of us in the 70s were trying to get leaders to be more nimble and flexible and share power and all that sort of stuff. I expected women to really find that first of all that I was there. They would be excited that I was a woman consultant, and then that they would be thrilled to hear what I was saying. And they were the most resistant to these ideas, which now I understand more about, the sense of that in a way they'd hardwired to become successful in that world. They'd hardwired in a way of being that I would say, what wires together, fires together, wires together, is more masculine. And they just simply couldn't let it go. So that was happening. I was watching this going, what's happening with women? And then at the same time, I had a very profound experience in Bali in Indonesia, where I had had a long time meditation practice and been on a spiritual path consciously since, let's say, about 18 or so. Which was more masculine, in nature, I would say. I didn't really know the divine feminine, but in this experience in Bali, I just felt myself absorbed into an energy, a deep feminine energy, which later I would come to call the energy of Kuan Yin, so that goddess of compassion energy, I'm sure you know. And in that moment, a question came into my being, or an inquiry: will you help to midwife the divine feminine on earth? And I remember this, and I write about it briefly in the book, but I remember this moment as not really, there was no answer to be given. It was more, my mind wasn't really operating anyway. It was more like just every cell in my body was so ready to say yes, and did say yes, of course, this is why I'm here. And when I came out of this, it was a couple of days of being in this sort of in this state of union. And my personality started to reorganize, and I started to figure out, okay, now what did I just say yes to? And how do I do that? And that started the path very specifically for me. So that was now 20 years ago. And that path meant within a few months, I left my consulting group in Paris. I opened my own practice, working with the women that I had seen were in trouble, but didn't know quite what was going on for them, trying to figure it out. And then realized I was like one step ahead of them only, and I needed to understand more about women and development, basically, and went back to graduate school to do that, and then began to apply the things that I had learned over 10 years put our programs right from the beginning in the university setting, so that it wouldn't get stuck over in this work with women and awakening, wouldn't get stuck over in some eddy. And at the end of the 10 years of research working with hundreds of students, my co-author and I, Dr. Suzanne Anderson, began to see a pattern. Our students were saying, you've got to get this out into the world. This relates to the 5 archetypes we'll probably talk about at some point. And so we wrote the book. We took a year off, wrote the book, and we're getting ready to bring it to the world. That was the end of 2012. And on January 3rd, 2013, my husband took his life. And, the trajectory I thought I was going in, which was sort of take flight in the world, up and out, you could say, was quite the opposite. And it was like life said, okay, you know some things, obviously, but we need to just really test drive these in the most, impossible conditions you can imagine. So I think that sets up maybe the conversation. Does that answer that?
Yeah. Yeah. And you go into this book, you have the sections where it's like a fairy tale, like the king. And I really love that. It's beautiful. And then you give tools. So you go into your story and your life and how you came into doing what you're doing now. And then the devastating loss of your husband. And then the next sections are, you go into 8 critical capacities of resilience. How did you come to those, just by going down the rabbit hole or going down into the darkness yourself, and what it's used, and that's what you found that could pull you back up?
Well, the interesting thing was, I didn't find these. So what to the last chapter of the first book that came out in 2016, The Way of the Mysterial Woman, Upgrading How You Live, Love, and Lead. The very last chapter, we had seen these 8 capacities arising in women, but it was like we were just starting to see them. We were like the archaeologists or something, looking through the rubble. And we tapped them. We'd kind of acknowledged that these are the capacities: multidimensional knowing, embracing paradox, authentic presence, energy stewardship, so on. But we hadn't lived into them. We even ourselves hadn't fully lived into them. And then this happened. And I didn't, and what I did not do was plan to go through this devastation using these. But what was installed, because the way we talk about the work that we do with women is upgrading the inner operating system. I mean, I have a very strong sense that women on the edge of evolution right now, women who are waking up, and the women who are drawn, I'm sure, to your work and to mine, that's already happening. But many women feel that because there's this unsettled sense of things aren't quite right, and I'm successful, maybe I have the right job I want, or the family or the children, but I'm not happy, and things aren't working inside, and there's something wrong with me, and I made a mistake. When actually those are signals of this new being almost. I feel it's almost like a new human species. We are in the process of becoming. So that work had already been happening in me, the work of becoming more whole, I guess, more real, more fully, truly myself, and able to navigate in a very uncertain world. And one thing I said right at the very beginning when this happened was, I named it, was that I really didn't know if I would get through this, because I lost, maybe I should just say, it wasn't just that I lost my beloved husband, but with his death, which came right before a wedding of his niece and kind of almost nephew, and that devastation, what happened there. And then I lost my home because he had also been, as we discovered, it basically had built this house of cards in his financial life, which was, I had my own business, he had his, and it all came crashing down. And so all my retirement, all my resources, my community, we lived on an island. We had this beautiful exotic sanctuary retreat center with, building antique houses from Indonesia. It's like an amazing experience. And all of that within 6 months was gone. So I wasn't, or maybe I should say, one thing that got shattered very early for me was that part of me, the heroic me that could just get through anything. I'd had other losses before. I'd had other difficult things happen in my life. And I just would rise up and do it. This felt so different because it was, I knew I had no certainty how I would get through this, but I was absolutely certain that I would walk in the way of the Mysterial Woman. Like that I was committed to. And it would be either, and if I got through and I came out the other side, and I would have something to share. But it wasn't that I identified these and thought, okay, now I need multidimensional knowing. It's actually later when I was writing the book, I realized, oh my goodness, I've just lived this. This is just what I've installed. I've just been deepening my embodiment of these capacities that I had witnessed earlier.
So you put all those unknowingly to the test, life threw it at you, and you became experiential for you. Everything that you had talked about or heard from the women you had to, that you wrote in your last book, you really put into practice. And not only in the loss of your husband, who was your beloved, so absolutely devastating, everything else, your business, your financial, your love and your financial. That would have crushed so many people. There's a lot of strength and resilience. You have so much strength and resilience. Sure it was crushing to go through. And it would be hard for a lot of people, women, to really navigate that without having some of the tools that you used yourself. So, and I know there's rituals. What are some of the, I mean, you did the way of the Mysterial Woman, and you did the 8 critical capacities, but then there's some inner tools. And I know ritual, when a lot of women return to ritual, I've done some ceremonies. It just feels so, it feels so soothing, and it feels like something that I'm not just doing, but I'm doing with generations of women in the past. It's almost like they're standing with me and, whispering or holding my hand and doing it with me. And, you're never alone. You're surrounded by all these, women that aren't even, we have support of so many women, luckily, in our female circle here, but then we've got the women that have passed or that are in the lineage of our DNA or the spirits that help us. What are some of the tools that you used? Did you go into any rituals that could help?
Yeah, yeah.
What can some women do that could help them?
Well, you'll read a lot of the rituals as you get
Yep.
further into the book, because
Oh, I'm
I
so
would say the
excited.
language of the Mysterial Woman, or an important language, is ritual. It brings together the unconscious and the conscious. The work that we do in the work with awakening this next level of potentiality, I call mysterial, just because I didn't have a name to describe it when we started seeing this way of being arising. But this way of being that's trying to come online now is a blend, for the first time really, of the feminine and the masculine. That's the point. I think there's a lot of this, the talk of returning to the feminine. Now, I don't feel there's any
Mhm.
return here, actually.
Mhm.
And in fact, that initial inquiry that came to me in the bliss state, will you help to midwife the divine feminine? I really understand that now most deeply as the feminine must get awakened now in a way it never has been able to be before, with the consciousness we have now, and then woven together with the, could say, divine masculine or the healthy masculine.
Mhm.
And then some way of being, as I say, I call mysterial, starts to arise when these energies come together. And ritual is one of the languages that I think we do have to pick up from the past that was known and understood, because it does speak to where the conscious mind doesn't travel, which is that unconscious world where it's like the iceberg. 2/3 of us is actually that unconscious under the surface of the water.
Mhm.
And we don't often take it into account. So we just try to get through these difficult things without tending to the embodied unconscious. And ritual does that. So it's super important. So one of the very first rituals that I did, and I asked my ally Michael Mead, who was the one you mentioned, who had sort of ushered me into Hades, said go and surrender. Um, he is a ritual elder. Actually, he's written a number of books and does a lot of work with ritual. And I invited all the close-in family and friends to our home on Vashon about maybe 3 weeks, 2 weeks after it had happened, because I realized that, I mean, it was so shattering, Nancy, for so many people. David was a public figure in Seattle, on the island of Vashon where we lived, an amazing being, and held a kind of, yeah, held a space in a lot of people's hearts. And there was none of us had the, let's say, signs or signals that something like this would happen. So it was the shock of it all for everybody, not just me, of course, most deeply me, impacting me in my life. And I had this sense that if we could um, meet together and actually be with what is each of us emotionally, like the congruence of that would be really important. And this is actually a meta capacity, one of the 8 you mentioned, that I call influencing system resonance. Because, we're in a system, and I was in a system, and I knew that I would do better if the system was resonant in some way, rather than everybody just shattered, and often our own distinct little spaces, grieving and suffering. And so in that gathering, we all came together, and one of the very first things we did, which was Michael shared this ritual, which is from an African tribe. I had a beautiful antique bowl from that David had found in China. It had a little chip out of it, so I wanted it to be precious, but also slightly already broken, let's say. And everybody came in. There were maybe 35 people in my living room, and we had a fire going in the fireplace. And one of my dear friends, the one who was with me when we found David, she's also works in the shamanic arts, and she had her rattles. And if you've ever been with somebody doing rattling, intense rattling, just around my whole body and around the whole room, it almost seemed like she had 10 arms. And then at a certain point, when that sort of the peak of this rattling, I took the bowl and I smashed it on the hearth of the fireplace into a million pieces. And then there was just silence. And this would be an example of where ritual can hold what we're all feeling, which is, this is a shattering event, and we cannot put the pieces back together. In that, you're not going to make a bowl. I wanted to signal this to my unconscious. There would be no going back. It was not going to be, I didn't know what was going to be ahead. But that life I had, I wasn't going to put it back together again, no matter what I did. And for many others, similarly. So, that was a ritual, for example, that married the conscious and the unconscious. Like, this is true. Let's just acknowledge that that's true. And then in the rest of the ritual, people would take turns and get up and speak, or say what they needed to say, if they felt moved. And then there was a ritual where they would take a cedar bough and put it on the fire as a blessing of release to David. There were other elements in the ritual that I go into in the book that I won't go into now, but my hope was in laying some of these rituals out for people, that I would give them, in a sense, permission to invent their own.
So that ritual, smashing of the bowl, is that a realization that you got that, oh, it's smashed, okay, it's going into 1,000 pieces, and that's the old, and I'm not going to be able to put it back together? Is that something you came to in the moment, or was that it was intended to be?
Yeah, it was intended that, because Michael had said, this is a ritual that is done. He's worked with many indigenous cultures, used in Africa. And this is why it's used. And it just felt so accurate for me. Yes, let's start with that.
It's so incredible. It's so needed. And it's what's so lost in our world today, in this Western world, is that ceremony and that kind of ritual, because it helps you integrate, and then it helps you let go, and it gives so much solace to it. And especially women, we used to always gather and we used to do our ceremonies. And I think a lot of women are returning to, sacred circle with each other. And such a beautiful thing that I'm seeing.
Well, actually, maybe I could just kind of come in here for a moment on that, because I do think for any one of your listeners who's going through any kind of trauma, loss, or disorientation, that could be leaving a relationship, it could be it could be an actual loss, it could be leaving a job. I mean, we're so many people right now in between worlds. And there's something about honoring that in between, and being able to mark it with some kind of ritual, like a threshold, the crossing of the threshold. And there was a moment, a ritual can be that very profoundly for someone, where they're kind of going into the new phase, whatever that is. But there's a big part of the unconscious that is like, I am not going there. I don't want to be a single woman, or I don't want to leave my job or not have a job, or I don't want to, whatever it is, I don't want to, because our identities are so, of course, connected. And the biggest hold is usually unconscious, because another part of us might be aware, this is the right move to make. I accept that this is my situation. And that's where creating threshold rituals becomes really, really important. And doing that with women is super powerful. I had
Mm-hmm.
my women friends around me from the very beginning, and they were an incredibly important surround, sort of loving surround that I could rest into.
Mm. So a threshold ceremony, because you've got two ends. One wants to move forward, the other is just not ready to let go of, so afraid of being a single woman, or as an example. So a threshold is kind of a ceremony honoring where you are right now. Is that?
Well, the thresholds, the crossing would be, for example, and people could create this in their own ways, but I've created these rituals for women where you first of all gather up the cycle you've been in. So that's a really important phase. It's not just leaping into the new. It's like, no,
Mm,
where have you been? gather
mhm,
gather it up. And maybe you do that by telling stories. Maybe you do that by writing little poems around for little phrases that relate to each of the seeds of that life that you had, then some way that you can really honor it. And then there is the important step of, sometimes it's called the sacrifice before the crossing. Like there is something that must be let go. You are, as you do a ritual like that, for example, a transition, being able to really stand as the one who does release that, what it has been taken from you, if it's been taken from you, or what you're choosing to go from. But in my case, I didn't ask for this, you know, shattering event to happen in my
mhm,
life. And I knew that there would come a time, and I waited for it. It was about a year in, a bit more than a year after it happened, where I wanted, if I could, to be able to consciously walk over that threshold. So I created a ritual with the woman I was working with, who was sort of holding space for me. And I took myself back there. This was after I did quite a cycle of shadow work and just all of the pieces I needed to, while I was broken up. Let's see if there's, while I'm shattered, let's see what I need, what I can see now that I want to let go of, and aspects of my ego defense or conditioned mind or whatever. And then I stood at this threshold, and I was guided by her back to the place where I could see myself standing right before I found David's body, before we found his body, and
mhm,
choose to that path. Say, yes, I don't know if I will get through this. I don't know how I will get through this, but I accept that this is my path, and I will make my
mhm,
path by walking, which
mm.
was the title of this new book. That was hugely integrating for me. It was like I pulled myself back, the part of me that was left behind, that didn't make this choice, you could say, consciously. And that little ritual was very integrating for me.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And so that is, somebody else that might be moving through, a similar situation, something that's very traumatic in their life. So ritual will be a very powerful tool. That's something that you would tell somebody right now. So say somebody's listening to this. What is somebody that is just in the very beginnings of something devastating happening in their
Yeah.
in their life? What is one of the things that they could do right now to help them begin to start navigating before they have to dive into the depths, to begin navigating and help them heal?
Well, the very, very first thing, and this will take a little time, but I'm going to speak to those people right now, those women listening, would be to to be with what is. It's like accepting this is what it is. It is here, not
Mhm, mhm,
resisting what is, as though I just have to get through this thing and I'll get back to somewhere. And that's the point, really, of the book, for me, of
mhm,
writing the book and getting it to others, is it is that this is your life, and you're not going to get those days back, whatever days you have as you walk across this brutal landscape of loss. And so being so present, like this is your life, and that this path, as you make it, as you unfold it, and it'll be unique for everyone, you make your path by walking, will have the possibility of taking you somewhere new, not back to who you were before, but somewhere new. And the ritual I started my day with every day, and still do today, was I would swing my legs around. I'd wake up in the morning, especially coming out of the unconscious. As people, those of you that are in the midst of any kind of challenging life circumstance know that that's a difficult time at night. You wake up and your conscious mind starts to reorganize, and it wants to attach to all of the devastation and the negativity. And the very first thing I would do would be put my feet on the floor and say out loud, I am so grateful to be alive in this body. May my day and what I bring into the day and who I am be a blessing and contribution on this planet. Whatever you say, whatever it is for you to say, I didn't necessarily believe it. I didn't necessarily feel grateful every day. And that's the beauty of ritual. You just do it. And it did and does reorganize it's like my conscious mind. I'm saying, this is the direction. I'm tuning my day here towards this, or all the many, many things that, in my case, during those many months, so many things came into the day that it was just hard to, imagine. And so this was like walking into the day. As Mary Oliver said, this is my one wild and precious life. Like really having that, walking on that sacred ground of this is my day. I claim it. I'm grateful for it. And I may not know how I'll get through it or if I'll get through it.
And I'm sure that felt really hollow at times, but like you said, it's ritual. You keep doing it, and you're trying to program that, subconscious mind to, this is the path that I'm going. And I'm sure there's days that you felt like curling up in a ball and doing nothing but crying. And sometimes you have to allow yourself that process, but then nope, you shake yourself off and swing your legs around, and we're going to walk forward.
Well, in walking, when I say you make your path by walking, that is to say, we're moving. There is a movement to that, but it's also could be stillness. There could be times where you just know what's needed now is to be very still, is not to move anywhere. But that isn't like you're not falling back in, you're riding the waves, let's say, somehow I think about it, the waves of grief and fear and anger and whatever they are. And you just need to not be acting. So making your path by walking isn't always movement. And there's that wonderful expression by a Zen practitioner, but it's basically to be still while still moving. That's what we're looking. So sometimes we might be still. We might be still, and that is actually a movement because we have to nourish ourselves. That in itself is a movement.
So it's just, but you're still in acceptance, and you're not denying the present moment or what is. And it can be stillness. It can be, staying in bed for a day, and it could be, maybe getting up and going for a walk in nature, whatever, but it doesn't have to necessarily be, like you said, a physical movement, or like you're going out and doing something big and bold. It's just not denying the present moment, and accepting where you are, right?
Yeah, and also it is the little steps that you make your path by walking step by step. That's really true. And one day maybe it's just this step, it's just that, and it's small. And sometimes I think, we can feel, especially if everything's been erased, like, oh my God, I got to get busy rebuilding my life. I mean, if you had told me, it would be 10 years. First of all, I was not convinced I would ever write this. I had a book already. I wasn't trying to be anybody's hero to write a book for anybody else. I really first just was working to get through this and stabilize all the people around this situation and myself, basically. And when it came time, at a certain point, I knew I needed to write, just to write myself back together. But like I needed it. And then my editor for my first book read the manuscript and said, okay, you've got to, this is something to offer to others. You have to do something with this. But 10 years, I mean, this was 10 years ago. I mean, in other words, time, and when you're in the middle of a massive reorganizing of your life through trauma or loss, as some of your listeners probably are, time is quite different. And you know, there's the sort of fear mind wants to quickly get out of this to somewhere else. And it will take the time that it will take. You know, it's like giving yourself that, the opportunity to let this unfold. And all you need is the next step. When you're actually going through trauma, this is part of the work I do. Work with developmental trauma in women. So I understand this pretty well. And I knew for myself, you know, the prefrontal lobe is basically off. You don't have a lot of that ability to plan and execute. You know, the executive function just isn't on board in the same way. But you can feel it should be. And so knowing, no, it shouldn't be right now. You need your friends to help you with some of those things. And you just need that one next lily pad. What's the lily pad? What's your next lily pad? What's your next? That's a much more feminine way of letting a cycle unfold than trying to drive yourself to some future that you think you should be, or on a timing that you think someone else has for you.
And that's why we're seeing so much unhappiness, really, at a soul level or at a spiritual level with a lot of women, because they might achieve that, climb that corporate ladder and achieve all these accolades, but something's inherently missing within themselves. And we're seeing this a lot with a lot of women. I'm seeing this nowadays a lot. You're helping so many women, guiding them through this with your processes and and all your tools. And I know you have. I really was interested in hearing a little bit of the new source code, embodying the deep masculine feminine expressions, because we hear a lot, it's either one or the other, but it's an embodiment of both of them. And you have 5 feminine masculine archetypes. And can you go into those really, really briefly, and maybe how that can help someone that might be experiencing some trauma, and how that might help them once they are able to embody these aspects?
Yeah. Well, that's kind of like a lifetime of work. So I'll try to see if I can do that, the high, the brief version. And it's all held
real quick
in the first book, The Way of the Mysterial Woman.
Yeah.
It's got it all there. But basically this was the research where we began our programs and for women, thinking, okay, we're going to help women find or cultivate the feminine. Well, okay, what is that? So we just started into that. Or what is the feminine? Okay. And as we did this work over years, we began to see that actually, first of all, the feminine was differentiated. There was a more static feminine and there was a more dynamic feminine. Most people think of this static feminine, we call that the mother archetype. And then we found that with every feminine archetype in this mother archetype, there was a polarity at the other end, which was a masculine archetype. We call that the hero energy, or that's a dynamic masculine. And so you could spend all the time you want with the mother working with cultivating this sense of loving compassion for yourself. I am enough just as I am, being embodied and all of that. You could do all of that. But if you didn't work with the masculine shadow, because we've had 5,000 years of this masculine paradigm in culture, you would not ever be able to fully land in that resonance and be embodied and be functioning in the world. So the healthy hero lets you know what is yours to do and gives you the agency to do that and to be empowered and to set boundaries. That's the first polarity. And then the father is the second masculine archetype, which is a more static form of the masculine, whereas the hero is more agentic. That is the part of ourselves that can take a stand in the world and wants to fit in and will fit in and comes into the systems of belonging in the world. And it's like the sovereign energy. It's quite different than hero. It's like I'm the queen of my realm. And then the other end of that masculine energy is this more dynamic feminine, which we call the maiden energy. And that is, I want to shake it up, break it up. I am free to express myself. I want to express myself. You could also call that the wild feminine, the Shakti energy there. And these are all expressions of women. And then when you go through cultivating each of those healthy archetypes, the final archetype that comes in that's sort of at a quantum level beyond is the Crone archetype. And the Crone, as we see it, has been trying to come in for a long time. It got burnt at the stake. It never had a chance to really fully come in. It's a very complex archetype, and it really allows us to hold the feminine and the masculine. That's the Crone energy. And the Crone energy, we would say, that archetypal energy is the archetype that's needed now in culture to meet the complexity of these times. So how does that come in? You have to have these other ones healthy along the way. So for somebody, I'll just go right to the very first archetype of the mother, somebody going through trauma immediately. And this is a sequence, starts with the mother, goes to the Crone. And in our programs, we work through the sequence with each of these in our deep shadow work. But the mother is about self-compassion. So this is the place to start for anybody. There's all the wonderful research of Dr. Kristen Neff around the potency of self-compassion, of just being so kind and gentle with ourselves as we are going through things. It's a hard one. It's a hard one, especially, I know for myself, I'm very compassionate with others and tending and caring for others. And it's still a work for me to just remember that, this is hard right now. And it's okay. And may I be gentle with myself. May I be kind to myself. May I be compassionate with myself and just slow myself down to be with me, my human self going through whatever is happening in my life, the turbulence. So that's the very short version. I don't know if it was short enough.
No, I mean, you went into that. It reminds me of like the tarot, the high priestess is like the Crone, and then you've got the empress, which is the maiden, and the hero, you've got your knights, and then you've got your emperor. I love it. I saw the graph on your website, and it really resonates. And I like the Crone because the elderly, I think of, older woman, maybe someone that's going through menopause and things are changing in her life and she's becoming wiser. And, a lot of society forgets the older woman and she becomes not.
The Crone archetype is coming in now in women in our last program, young women in their 30s, all the way up to somebody who's 78. But the young women, this energy, I'm telling you, it is trying to download now. And it's not, of course, their Crone energy will get more robust over years, but the actual archetypal energy is trying to come in now. This is such a beautiful thing. And it can stream in a really clear way when the other archetypes downstream from it, when we've actually got access to the energy of the healthy mother, hero, father, and maiden. So it's a very beautiful thing. And then for women, older women, in the life cycle, it's then the opportunity to embrace that aspect rather than, if I actually embrace this wisdom, that means I'm really getting old and going to be forgotten by society, but to actually really claim the potency of our Crone nature, actually, no matter what age we are.
Love it. Beautiful. And this, I'm sure, is something that you go more into. I know you have a 15-month program. I think it already started in February, didn't it? It just started. Emergence 2023. Do you do that? Well, do you do it?
We're doing it every 15 months, basically every 18 months. So
okay,
next one, people can sign up on a wait list, but also if people are interested, shall I share a little bit about how they get in touch? Is that a good?
Yeah, absolutely. That was my next question. So I love that.
Yeah, they can go to the website, which is Mysterial, Mystereal, woman.com. and read a little more and sort of resonate around there with us, get on our mailing list, because I have an in-person workshop coming up in June, a retreat, a weekend with women. I have, and I'll be doing some online programs starting in the fall that are like the entry-level Mysterial Essentials program that people can do, that just gets them to touch into each of the archetypes before the deeper program that launches in 2024. Yeah.
And you've got your book,
Mhm.
the way the Mysterial Woman, right? Isn't that what it?
First
Yeah,
one, yeah, The Way of the Mysterial Woman.
Mysterial Woman. So that's out, and then you've got your new one that's releasing in June 13th. Is that still the
That's right. That is
time?
very much the day. Yeah.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And I was so fortunate to get a pre-release, and I'm delving into it. I love it. It's beautiful. And it's already helping me in so many ways. Like it really resonates with me. So, but I thank you so much for coming on the show today. I am really excited. Everybody needs to pick up this book, pre-order it. Where is it available? Is it on your site,
Everywhere.
Amazon,
Well,
everywhere?
you
Okay.
can click on Amazon, but you can also
Okay.
go to my website, and then I have a book page, which is
Hmm.
kind of interesting to read, because you can also then click to bookshop or Amazon or your local bookstore. They won't have it yet in the local bookstore, but you can pre-order it on Amazon. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right here. So they can pre-order it right now.
Yeah.
Great.
And on my
Well,
webpage,
thank you.
I put some
Oh,
images
mhm.
from the stories there, which are kind of, once you read
Oh,
the book, it's kind of fun to look.
oh, I'm looking at it right now. Oh, is that on the property?
Yeah.
The one that looks like a pagoda? Oh my
Mhm.
gosh, beautiful. Oh my gosh. Oh, I'm gonna look at this after we get off this call. It's pretty amazing. But I do have one more question before there's your kitty cat. I do have one more question that I ask all my guests, and that is, what does it mean for you to live with an awakened heart?
Hmm. What does it mean for me to live with an awakened heart? Well, the question itself just drops me into my heart, so it's beautiful.
Mm,
I'd say it's being fully present for myself, showing up in my moment, in this moment. And when I'm in that place in me, um, and this is a beautiful, this was Ram Dass said this: when I'm in this place in me and you are in that place in you, there is only one of us.
mm,
So that experience would probably sum it up.
beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And Ram Dass, everybody loves him. So that's a beautiful example. Presence, pure presence. That's all that is. Thank you so much, Suzanne. I appreciate you coming on here.
Nancy, for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Awaken Heart podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, share it with a friend. And if you haven't already, head on over to your favorite podcast app to subscribe, rate, and review. If you have any comments, questions, or feedback, you can reach me at theawakenheartpodcast.com.